why would Google want to hide my channel, I wonder? Could it be that in the last month, 3 of my videos, we're only going to discuss the heliocentric gravity, but 3 videos I've done within the last 4 weeks have absolutely annihilated the heliocentric claims of gravity.
Well, that's one way to look at what you did. It's the wrong way to look at it, but it's one way to look at it. Hi, I'm Quasar, and this is Quasar Does Astronomy. Today we're going to be looking at a video series by Level Earth Observer. Level Earth Observer is a flat earther who likes to use his crane to try and demonstrate that gravity doesn't exist. So, in his series of 4 videos, he tries to demonstrate that mass doesn't attract mass and that gravity doesn't exist. So, let's go ahead and debunk each one of his videos and maybe teach him a thing or two about gravity in the process.
The first video a month ago was The Globe Has Bad Wind. Is where I discussed the fact that a crane can have 350 foot of rope with the block dangling and be totally still, supposedly on a spinning ball that's doing 600 miles an hour, approximately where I am. And yet that same force of gravity that holds tower cranes to a spinning ball, and of course over the course of a 12-hour day, that tower crane will be upside down at the end of the shift relative to the start of the shift.
Let's go ahead and take a look at Level Earth Observer's first video called Earth Has Bad Wind. Let's see if he gets off on the right foot.
Block's moving about a bit there. Wind speed 16 miles an hour. So let's just get this right. On a calm day, tower cranes are deadly still with their block down. In this case, I'm on a new job. Crane's approximately from the ground to the top of the jib, approximately 350 foot tall. So on a calm day, I'm expected to believe this crane can be deadly still.
Looks like Level Earth Observer hasn't seen any of my previous videos. If he had, he would have known that everything in the frame is moving at the exact same tangential velocity. Now this means that none of it's moving in relation to anything else. So gravity doesn't really have a major role to play in this interaction. So where are you going with this?
The heliocentric fantasists will claim that gravity is what makes tower cranes deadly still on a spinning ball. And yet that ridiculous pantomime force known as gravity can be overcome by a little bit of wind. Oh dear. I mean, do you honestly believe it would be possible to drive machines like this on a ball that's spinning 600 miles an hour from my right to my left?
Yes.
The real world tells us that's nonsense. My job tells us that's nonsense. All known demonstrable science tells us that's nonsense. Even the wind tells us that's nonsense.
It does not.
In fact, there's flat earth evidence all around. I've just spotted. There's gas on that boat, showing that gas needs a container.
Of course it does. Let's say that that boat's carrying a tank of compressed oxygen. Now, if I take away the container, that oxygen is now allowed to mix with the atmosphere, and I would no longer have a tank of compressed oxygen, would I?
And of course we got a 350 foot tall tower crane, which makes an absolute mockery of the heliocentric fantasy. And if Mr. Foucault could see this, he would be shuddering at the thought of his Masonic magic trick that's in all these museums being exposed for what it is. Utter fucking nonsense.
Well, you see, unlike some people in this video, Foucault understood physics. You offered 0 evidence to debunk what he said, and just called him a wizard. So, not starting off very well for you. Video 1, debunked. Alright, let's go back to the summary video and see where Level Earth Observer decides to go from there.
And the only thing you can refute me with is a practical demonstration backing the heliocentric claims. you can't, because it's obviously ridiculous.
Okay, so it's practical demonstrations you want. Well, then practical demonstrations you shall get.
We got to this video. Mass attracts mass, where I drop and talk about the crane doing lifts next to the side of a building. Of course, at the start of that video, I showed the Cavendish Experiment, where supposedly balls were being attracted to each other.
Okay, let's take a look at your next video, Flat Earth, Mass Attracting Mass, and see if you provide any better evidence there.
We're going to have a quick look of the heliocentric fantasist claims that mass attracts mass. We're going to have a quick look at this demonstration, and then we're going to absolutely annihilate it with practical reality. Let's have a quick look.
On each end of the bar we put a lead ball. The two balls balance and the bar is free to turn. Now we put another ball on the left side of each of the two original ones.
Cue the psychedelic magnetic music to get you to believe in this absurdity. Let's have a look.
If everything attracts everything else, the balls should attract each other and the bar should move.
Well, I guess you're going to provide the practical demonstration on this one? It's kind of weird that you'd ask me to provide a practical demonstration and then show a practical demonstration. So, in case your practical demonstration isn't good enough for you, what I'm going to show you is a practical demonstration done by YouTuber Jen Jen. Jen Jen has done the Cavendish Experiment in her dorm room on a budget. It's actually a very well done video, and it explores the history of the Cavendish Experiment and how to find the gravitational constant G. So the link for that video will be in the description below, and should you check it out, it's a very good video, well put together. I don't have my own video on the Cavendish Experiment yet, but I hope to do so in a future video where I do a bunch of homemade experiments that you can also do in your home.
Ooh, how do I know you're not turning that above the camera there, my dear man? I don't. But what I do know is what you're showing me there is utter nonsense of the highest order. And I can show you why. Bear with me.
Okay, that's a fair point. In the demonstration that Level Earth Observer provided, you can't see the full apparatus of the experiment, so we can't be absolutely certain he's not turning the wire in some way, shape, or form. But in the video I described in the description below, you'll be able to see the full apparatus of the experiment. So, either way, let's see how he's going to debunk this.
And this is how I know that chap was talking utter nonsense. Core, approximately 60 tonne, plus 30 tonne of staging and shuttering. So according to that chap, every time I go next to that core with the crane, there's some attraction, some mass attracting mass.
Yes.
Bearing in mind, I've got not only, to the right we've got the Earth pulling according to the globe, but of course to the left you've got the Earth pulling plus another 90 tonne. So there should be a greater mass pulling on the crane's load or the crane's block.
Oh boy, so you're really not going to like this. See, you may think that 90 tons is a lot, but when you compare it to the mass of the Earth, it's inconsequential. Let's say that you're lifting a load, and your load is 10 tons. So if a pigeon lands on that load of 10 tons, yes, it does weigh more. However, because of the inconsequential mass of the pigeon compared to the 10-ton load, you won't see a noticeable difference.
Right, just come up here to give you a slightly easier demonstration. We'll pretend this is a building or the core. So according to the claims of the heliocentric fantasists, every time I come down, let's assume my finger's the crane with a load. With a load, let's say that's a 200-ton building. I'm coming down with a load, say some concrete. They're claiming that mass attracts mass. So according to their fantasy world, Every time I do a lift, either next to a building or next to a core, there's a pulling force pulling at the crane's load or block to try and get it to attract to each other. Don't you think if that was real, tower crane drivers, every crane driver on earth would need to be taught that? Don't you think that? It's just nonsense of the highest order. Prime example, a library building years ago, I had 6 ton in a concrete skip. Inside this massive library building, there were students in the windows, at the benches, studying on their computers. I had 6 ton of concrete. Now, thankfully, the mass attracting mass is utter nonsense, because the 6 ton of concrete would have gone straight through the windows and destroyed the library building of the university, and probably took out quite a few students as well. Can you see how ridiculous this heliocentric nonsense is?
Okay, so let's assume that your demonstration was correct, and you have a 6-ton ball of cement falling to the earth. And let's say that the library is 200 tons. And we'll say that the distance between their two centers is about 40 meters. So when we do the math, the force of gravity between the two objects is 4.1 times 10 to the negative 5th newtons. So we take that and we plug it into F equals ma. We get an acceleration of 7.6 times 10 to the negative 9th meters per second squared. And that's ignoring friction. So in the short amount of time that the 6-ton ball is falling towards the earth, you'll see next to 0 movement towards the building. This is what we would expect to happen. Okay, that's video 2 debunked. Let's see if he gets any better in video 3.
Again, it destroys their silly set of stories. You can only refute me via practical demonstration. You've got to do it yourself under proper scientific conditions, and you've got to mention me in the video, my channel name, so I know it's you doing the demonstration, and it has to be scientific, filmed from top to bottom, backing the claims of mass attracting mass, thus debunking me, objective reality. Let's see it. Because again, that video destroys the globe fantasy.
Look, that's not how science works. I don't have to do every experiment in order for something to be true. You don't have to do every experiment in order for something to be true. What's the difference if I do the experiment or YouTuber Jen does the experiment? This doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of the experiment. If the experiment itself is good, then that's what you have to debunk. You can't debunk the person doing the experiment because they're not the person bringing the argument, or they're not you. That's not how science works. If the experiment is good, it doesn't matter who the experimenter is.
Anyway, then we did a video 2 days ago, Mass Attracts Mass Part 2, where I gave you another logical, practical demonstration using the cranes and heavy weights, where of course we saw the heliocentric experiment and claims at the start of my video with the pyramid and the ball. The pyramid seemed to get heavier due to a mass attracting mass when they put the lead ball under it, and of course I destroyed that claim by giving you a practical, logical, real world demonstration using the claim, discussing heavy weights and loads being lifted onto gigantic buildings. Of course, the bigger the building, the heavier the crane's load, the more it makes an absolute mockery of the heliocentric claims of gravity.
Okay, well, we're 2 for 2 debunking your videos so far. Let's see if you bring anything new in video 3.
Last week we destroyed the heliocentric fantasy of mass attracting mass. We're going to do it again in a slightly different manner this time.
First, we weigh a small lead pyramid to measure the force of attraction between it and the Earth. Its weight is 152.166 grams. Now we move the heavy lead ball under the scale, adding its mass to the mass of the Earth. The weight has increased by 1/1000th of a gram, which represents the attraction between the pyramid and the ball. When the mass under the pyramid got bigger, the force of attraction did too.
Utter nonsense, and this is why I know that.
Okay, so this is the experiment he's going to try to debunk with a crane. Finally.
And this is how I know that what that chap was saying was utter nonsense, yet again. Let's assume this is a tall building, 200 ton, right? I'm being generous here. A tall building would generally be, with a concrete core, concrete floors, a lot heavier. Let's say it's a 10-story building weighing 200 ton. I'm picking up 12 ton, which is the absolute limit I can pick up in this tower crane, okay? So I've picked up 12 ton from the ground, the limit the crane can pick up, hoisted up, slewed across to above the building. I'm now lowering my 12 ton down onto the roof of the 200 ton building. I stop it a few inches above the top of the building so the banksman can get the skids to land the load onto the building, okay? Now, according to that chap, there's a pulling force when I get near that building, the mass attracting mass. Now, if that was true, and I'm at the absolute limit of my lifting capacity in the crane, and I'm above a 200 plus ton building, the so-called mass attracted mass would basically put the crane over the limit. And I'd get the fucking alarm bells ringing, as if the weight then would suddenly be too much. Bearing in mind, I'm at the limit of the lifting capacity when I pick this 12-ton load up.
Okay, Level Earth Observer, let's take a look at what you had to say. Now, the building and the Earth are vastly different masses. So the percent change in mass of the Earth when you add the building to it is basically non-existent. So when we're measuring a massive object like the load you're carrying at 12 tons, and we're adding to it a very, very small percentage change in the mass of the Earth, you're not going to see an appreciable difference. In the video you showed, the mass of the pyramid increased by only 1/1000th of a gram. Now, I don't know how precise the scale is on your crane, but 1/1000th of a gram is less than the weight of a paperclip. You're not going to notice this in your crane while you're doing work.
In those 3 videos, I've destroyed the heliocentric gravity. And it's obvious. Google's hiding my channel. I've had morons visit me, calling me names, spewing garbage, sophistry, debunking their own Cavendish experiment in a pathetic attempt to try and save face. It's finished, folks. The globe's finished. It's time to mop up the mess and put this thing to bed once and for all, because those 3 videos have destroyed heliocentric gravity. Fact.
Level Earth Observer, your problem is that you don't understand physics. You don't understand what gravity does. You make a straw man out of gravity by claiming it does all of these things that it doesn't do. It doesn't do half of what you said it does in your videos. I don't understand how you can claim something is wrong and then not understand how it works. If you truly want to understand how gravity works, get a physics textbook, learn how it works, and then you can come back and say, hey, I don't think gravity should work this way because gravity should be doing this instead, or gravity doesn't exist. But until you learn what gravity is, you can't make claims of what it does. That'll wrap up my debunk of Level Earth Observer. Join me next time, where, upon request, I'll be looking at a space denier. Thank you for joining me for today's debunk. I'm Quasar, and this has been Quasar Does Astronomy. Keep learning.